to your questions about Bitcoin. I don't know, and I do want to gauge before we get started how much you guys know about Bitcoin, what your familiarity is. My goal in this talk, for those of you who are new to Bitcoin, as well as those of you who have heard a little bit about it or have seen me talk about it, is to give you an idea of what Bitcoin is, how it works roughly, why people like it, why it's important, and why it's useful. What some of the implications are beyond just sort of technology, like why is it so interesting and fascinating and potentially world-changing, and then how you can actually use it yourself. The title of our talk is Bitcoin in Our Decentralized Future. So we're going to be looking at what the concept of decentralization is and what it has to do with Bitcoin. But yeah, before we get started, by show of hands, for those of you who are on screen, like how many of you guys feel confident you know what Bitcoin is? Lydia does not seem very confident. Your hand is like halfway up there.
Well, okay, the question is like, do you know what it is? But yeah, like baseline.
Baseline, okay.
Yeah.
Has anyone on the call not heard of Bitcoin before like 2017? Let's just say that. All right, good. So pretty good awareness. I'd be interested in hearing, how do you think about Bitcoin, Lydia? I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What do you think Bitcoin is? How would you explain it very roughly?
Great, thanks, James. Well, the way that I've understood it is that it's kind of a disruptive form of currency in that, oh God, I'm so ignorant. This is embarrassing. I couldn't give you specifics, but I do know is that it's changing the way in which we view currency and its potential and the future of it. So, yeah.
Anyone else want to volunteer to answer to that? How have you heard your friends or people you know talking about Bitcoin? Some of the things which you commonly hear.
I've heard people say it's going to change the way we identify ownership, and I guess like tag things, but I have no idea what that means or how that actually plays out.
Awesome. And I appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts, sharing what you've encountered, because that's kind of what I want to get into. Hopefully some of the misconceptions we can clear up, some of the things we can clarify. You guys both gave very good answers to that actually, and like very good starting points, because we're going to get into both of those things in the course of this talk. So let's launch into it. It was nice seeing your beautiful faces, or at least half of your beautiful faces, because some of you aren't on camera, and I appreciate that. You may be driving right now. Be careful. Let's launch into the slide deck. So I'm going to share my screen. You're going to see my messy desktop, because that's what happens when you work in a Bitcoin startup. It gets messy. So, all right. Can someone give me an audio recognition?
You're good. We got it.
All right, sweet. Look at that. Bitcoin in our decentralized future. Guy is looking up ahead to his decentralized future, or else to his messy wall at his office. So one of the two. Let's talk first about what Bitcoin is. That is the main, I think we need to define first and foremost. And first of all, it's not this picture. You see this picture in every article about Bitcoin. It's maddening, intensely frustrating. These are little tokens with the Bitcoin logo on them. They're not Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, as most of you probably realize, is a digital currency. But whether that's, how people think about it is actually the important question here. And you get all kinds of ranges of responses, right? People saying, oh yeah, Bitcoin is that drug money for the internet, right? Oh, it's nerd money. That's totally fake. It's not real money. It's the future of money, man. I get the future of money, man, one a lot. Most of the time people don't know what Bitcoin actually is when they say it. They're just like, yeah, it sounds future-y, so it must be the future. So we're gonna define a little bit further into that. And basically, we know so far what it's not, which is not digital tokens. I have this personal vendetta against the stock photo industry and Bitcoin that I really want to overthrow it, because right now it's just awful. Bitcoin was invented in 2009. Or the concept was developed in 2000 and released in 2008. And the first, it really came into motion in 2009. And I define Bitcoin, I describe Bitcoin in sort of a three-part way. So first, Bitcoin is a payment method, right? So a digital currency, a digital cash for sending peer-to-peer payments online. The way it was described by its anonymous inventor, important detail, Satoshi Nakamoto, was a peer-to-peer electronic cash. Now, there were other digital currencies made before. That Bitcoin is unique, and the next two definitions of Bitcoin, which I'm going to give, are parts of the definition, will help explain why it's different and why it's so important. But first and foremost, it's a payment method. It's a way of buying things person to person online. So and many people compare it to digital cash or digital gold, and that it doesn't work through intermediaries like a credit card processor or a bank. You're just basically sending transactions directly from one peer to another peer on this in this Bitcoin thing, right? So transactions in Bitcoin, what's interesting to note is that they aren't actually exchanging funds. There are actual coins, right? That's why I brought up that picture earlier, a few slides ago, was Bitcoin is not actually like a coin you're trading between people, not even like a digital coin. You're actually, what you're doing is you're signing entries. And what we're going to sign entries into is something I'm going to explain a couple of slides from now. But think of it that way. You're actually basically recording a record of a transfer of intangible asset. I will not explain this chart on the left side. I will explain a little bit further down. Even I do not fully understand all the cryptography behind Bitcoin. So, that's my weak spot. Feel free to exploit it in the question and answer period. So the next thing that Bitcoin is, as a part of this whole, is a network. So Bitcoin, these entries are being processed by what's called a distributed network of computers, which are called Bitcoin miners. So you've probably heard of Bitcoin mining before. These are the computers that do the math required to validate Bitcoin transactions. So they're actually performing something called the cryptographic hash function, which I also will not explain fully. But basically, it's like solving a very complicated math problem, as how many people who I respect have described this. This is what one processes those entries and adds those to the Bitcoin network, which we're going to explain in a second. It's also what generates new Bitcoin. So the creation of new Bitcoin is not happening through a central party or a central person or group of computers or whatever. It's actually happening automatically as these transactions are processed. This is how new Bitcoin is unleashed into the network and how the money supply is regulated. That also will come up a little bit later on. There's a lot of implications to a lot of this stuff, which you'll see it come together in a second. But the basic thing to know is that this network of miners is distributed. Anyone can run a Bitcoin miner. Usually it's more affordable to do if you have a large scale access to electricity. But this is, again, a network of specialized computers running those transactions. So one question that Cassius had actually before the call, which he posted in Workplace when I put out a call for questions, was why is Bitcoin more important than other cryptocurrencies? And we haven't fully defined cryptocurrencies yet, but basically other digital currencies in the world right now, which you may have heard of. There is a very good answer to that, which I'm going to give you a sneak preview of here. Basically, fun fact about the Bitcoin network is that by hash rate, by the computing power to solve those cryptographic hash functions, the Bitcoin network, all those computers which we talked about all around the world, it's 100 times faster and more powerful than all of Google's computers, right? All of Google's computing power, which is pretty impressive for a 8-year-old technology. This helps explain why Bitcoin is successful against other cryptocurrencies, because it has way more hashing power behind it. And the hashing power is, again, what helps to process and secure the Bitcoin network and the transactions happening there. It also ensures, again, that only that certain amount of Bitcoin is generated at any given time. No one can take over that network very easily and manipulate the money supply, manipulate the direction of the code project, or manipulate what transactions are included in the network. So Bitcoin is much more robust in that respect than any other digital currency out there. And we'll explain a little bit more about why that matters just in general in the money world in a second. So third part of Bitcoin where this all comes together is Bitcoin is also a ledger. It's a distributed ledger as well as a distributed network. So what those entries are going into is a ledger, which we call the blockchain. So you may have heard of the blockchain before. These transactions are growing into groups called blocks. And those blocks are then validated by the miners and added to a shared distributed ledger of transactions called the blockchain. So this is part of what makes Bitcoin very interesting. What makes it unique is that you are running a system for recording entries of money, or who owns money, where it's been spent, how much money exists. That can be done in a distributed manner. So you don't need a central party, you don't need a website, a bank, company, or government to decide where these transactions went. All of these different ledgers, which everybody has on their system. If you're using Bitcoin, you may have a node of the network or be running a client on the Bitcoin network. You have your own record transactions. But solving that problem of, does everyone else in the network agree that that transaction happened and this money is not with this person? That's a problem which heretofore has not been solved in computer science. If you're a computer science nerd, this is called the Byzantine generals problem. It's just basically a question of how do we establish a trusted record of information across a group of people who don't always know each other. And this is what Bitcoin does with flying colors. So previously, before, you had digital currencies before Bitcoin. There's a project called DigiCash in the 90s if you want to look that up. Their thing was that they had a central website running it, right? And while that had some advantages in the fact that it was digital currency, because it was a central website, the website can go down. People running the website can be corrupted. They can change that ledger. Basically, it's only one copy of the ledger, and it's controlled by somebody who's not you. With Bitcoin, everybody participating in the network has a copy of this ledger, and those ledgers are maintained through consensus across the entire world without you having to know anybody. This is amazing. This is not just money. This is a record keeping on the internet, which you don't have to have a central party controlling. So this has its advantages. This blockchain concept, this distributed network concept, this payment method. And we're going to get into that in this presentation. So what that does is it creates the first record of history, and particularly history for money and for transactions. It's trustless. Again, you don't have to trust the website or the government or the bank or the company running your transaction system, your payment system is going to be doing a good job, being honest. You also don't have to worry about any of those guys corrupting that record. You could try to corrupt one record of the Bitcoin blockchain, but you have 10,000 other copies out there which are going to refute you, and which that network of miners is going to weed out. It's also permanent. Again, this is kind of a function of incorruptibility. Is once a block has been added to the blockchain, you can't really go back and erase that. It's possible for transactions to get rejected by the blockchain, but once it's added into a block and in the blockchain confirmed, then you can't go back and reassign money to yourself or reuse the money. And this has been all big problems with any kind of digital payment system before. Now remember that all the money you use today is essentially digital. So a lot of the problems which I've described, which Bitcoin solves, apply to your money today. That's why Bitcoin is so interesting and why it's excited the interest of the world so much. So before we go any further, I do want to talk a little bit about the concept of decentralization, because all of I just mentioned to you about trustlessness and incorruptibility and permanency across a distributed network, a distributed ledger, is a good example of what we would call decentralization, which is a kind of a broader concept in political philosophy and in technology, particularly defined by one dictionary as the process of redistributing or dispersing functions, powers, people, or things away from a central location or authority. So as with Bitcoin, it's basically distributing or decentralizing money away from the need for one company or group or website or government to control it. We're going to get more into why this matters later. Keep this in mind as we go forward. So let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit on how a payment works. Now, we won't get too far down the rabbit hole. I can definitely recommend some resources for you if you really do want to see how it works. If you're a math nerd, if you're a computer science whiz, if you just want to understand it really deep level. But we're going to give you a high level view of this. So on an above ground view, to an average user, what I'm doing is I'm opening an application called a Bitcoin wallet, which is kind of like my consumer interface for where I have my Bitcoin stored, where I can send it, where I can receive it. So that's called the Bitcoin wallet. And oftentimes when I'm going to pay, I'm just scanning someone else's Bitcoin wallet or their Bitcoin wallet address with my phone, with my Bitcoin wallet app, and then just clicking send. So the Bitcoin user experience has definitely evolved a lot. It's gotten a lot better. There's still a long way to go, but right now it's fairly simple. And to the average user, this is all you really need to know. This is how Bitcoin works to them. But under the hood, which is where we're going to go, is much more interesting. And we're going to explain a little bit more what this chart is doing here. So Bitcoin employs something called cryptography to validate transactions, to kind of actually to make records. So there's a concept in cryptography called public and private key cryptography. And this is, again, a little outside of my wheelhouse, but essentially a public key, a good analogy for a public key is sort of like the public address for your money or your email address, perhaps. A private key is going to work a lot more like your password for your money, or the thing which is, or even actually like an actual key for a lock. It's something which unlocks something. A public key is sort of something which helps to, in the process of creating a Bitcoin transaction, it pairs with the private key. And those two things create and verify a digital signature, which is sort of like your way of signing an entry, which is saying, hey, I want to send this much Bitcoin to Alice or to Bob. This signed transaction message is what's broadcast to the Bitcoin network when you press send in your wallet. And then it's added to the ledger, to the blockchain, by those miners. So what you're seeing on the left here, it's a combination. You see the public key combining with the private key to verify and sign a signature, which is all these different hashes are being added in a chain. So let's get more into why Bitcoin is useful. You've kind of seen how it works at a sort of higher level and how it secures itself, and then of course what it is. But why do people actually find this useful, right? Because this is a lot of computer science innovations roll around all the time, but nobody uses them, right? Guys at MIT are just sitting around, with their sitting on their hands with this technology. But this is one case where it kind of broke out to the real world, and that's because it, as a payment system, as a money, Bitcoin is revolutionary. So this is where I get excited because this is what I work on every day at BitPay. But I actually only cut it down to one slide, so you're lucky. You really dodged a bullet on this one, guys. Basically, what Bitcoin is competing with in the world of payments are credit cards and bank transfers, more or less. These are kind of two of the main ways in which different accounts are funded. Now, you can talk about Venmo and PayPal and all these guys, but they're built on the infrastructure of centralized banks and centralized credit card processors, and credit card processors are built in the back of banks. The newest the newest technology we have are the credit cards, and they were made in the 1950s. They were not made for an online world. They were not made for the web or for e-commerce on the web. We see this all the time. Chargebacks from credit cards, which oftentimes are fraudulent, cost merchants billions of dollars a year. Identity theft affects millions of people every year. You have recently massive publicized cases of places like Target and Home Depot, I think, losing hundreds of thousands of credit card numbers, maybe possibly in the millions, to hackers. The internet is not secure. In case you heard about this recent CIA thing, nothing is secure on the internet. And it's very depressing. Don't let me go too far down that rabbit hole because I will end up drinking myself to an early grave. Bitcoin, however, does some things which makes it far more secure, far more efficient, and far more cost effective than any of the payment systems we've seen so far in the world today. So Bitcoin was made for the internet. It's the currency of the internet. It works. It was designed to work in the way that the internet works as a protocol for online transactions. So Bitcoin, compared to bank transfers and credit cards, which are oftentimes limited to the developed world, Bitcoin is available to anyone with an internet connection. And what's very interesting is that many countries in the developing world, whether you're in Africa or Latin America, they don't have a complex or well-developed banking infrastructure, or they certainly don't have access to credit card providers. They do have internet access. It's fascinating, especially like cellular infrastructure and internet infrastructure is pretty well developed in much of Africa, especially compared to the financial system. So Bitcoin expands the financial system to everybody on Earth. This is a big deal in payments because if you're a multinational corporation and you want to reach customers, this is a way to do that without adding any really additional overhead to your way of reaching customers in the world. It also allows me to send money to Hannah in Pennsylvania as easily as I can send someone to the person sitting across from me in the room right now, staring at me intently and threatening me if I don't do a good job today. So either way, whether you're across the room or around the world, send money and settle within minutes. So that's another thing about Bitcoin is that settlement times are really, really fast. If there's a lot of debate these days about the delayed times and the confirmation times taking longer because Bitcoin's getting so popular, but still 10 minutes to an hour, which are kind of some of the upper edges of how long Bitcoin takes to settle. It's way better than 2 to 3 days for ACH transfers, or even longer for more obtuse and kind of roundabout things like international wire transfers, for instance. So Bitcoin is much faster, and that's also a huge benefit to companies which move money internationally. So companies move billions of dollars between subsidiaries, between their franchises, to other companies, people they're paying all the time. And most of us miss those things. We don't see them happening, but there are huge costs in terms of time and money for that. A couple other things too. Secure transactions. We mentioned the credit card fraud problem. When you're paying with a credit card, you're basically exposing all the personal information somebody needs to go and use that credit card elsewhere. You're essentially exposing like your private key, that's sort of the password for your money, when you're storing a credit card on a website or with a merchant. And Bitcoin is pseudonymous. So pseudonymity basically means that the information which you're transmitting with a Bitcoin payment, it's information, it means something, but it's not tied to your identity. It's not tied to any kind of information which will allow someone to actually make a Bitcoin payment on your behalf without your consent. Bitcoin payments have to be made from the person holding the private key, which usually means it's device-based. So you sidestep the problem of identity theft. You sidestep the further problem of merchant chargebacks. And because of this also, you can really have low-cost payments, especially on the merchant side. So many of the fees which credit card processors charge, which PayPal charges, they build into those fees the cost of all the fraud that happens. These are 2 to 3%, 3 to 4% fees, which every business has to pay when you pay with a credit card. With Bitcoin, you can accept payments for 0% fees. Now, if you use BitPay, it's a 1% fee, but we add value there. So you could ask me about that later. So there are a lot of benefits of using Bitcoin for payments, and it's really fantastic. Whether you're a business or an individual, there are tremendous benefits. You'll benefit very bigly. So let's get into the exciting stuff. What does Bitcoin mean for tech? Because where we're going, we don't need centralized ledgers. If you guys, hopefully you watched Back to the Future and you know what I'm talking about, that is what it's all about. We are talking about a world in which any kind of centralized ledger you can imagine, not just money, can be affected by what Satoshi Nakamoto developed with this distributed ledger concept. So beyond payments even, and I'm primarily a payments guy. It's what we work on at BitPay. We're working on a few of these other sort of concepts as well. It's ultra hush hush, but a few of the things we're going to go through. One, authentication on the web. Passwords are extremely, extremely insecure. So if you guys are familiar with the Cloud Bleed issue, which recently took place, a lot of the sites using a content provider called Cloudflare they recently figured out there was a bug in some Cloudflare software, which basically leaked passwords, all kinds of sensitive information, server logs, login logs, all kinds of things, which basically just rendered all of your passwords insecure. Many of your passwords, perhaps. I can't speak to all of the websites you use, but there are frequently large bugs like this. I think a few years ago there was one with SSL, which basically exposed your passwords to the entire world, which reduced your security significantly. And websites have to spend a lot of time working on infrastructure to maintain this security and the password infrastructure. It's just a little bit complex. And what Bitcoin can do, there's a great project called BitAuth, which one of my friends is working on, which you should check out. It employs the private key and public key concept for authentication online. So when you're using public and private key to sign a Bitcoin transaction, that's authentication. It's just like a password and logging in somewhere, except the password's on your device and nobody else has it, and nobody else can have it because it's not on the web. The same concept you could potentially have for a website, where you go to a website and you just click and you're logged in, baby. Very, very simple, and also much more secure and much more cost-effective for websites. I'm going to hurry up a little bit, speed up a little bit, because I think I'm enjoying myself too much. Marketplaces, OpenBazaar. These guys are using the Bitcoin distributed concept to have distributed nodes where you can actually host a marketplace and sell anything you want, and nobody can censor it because it's not a centralized marketplace. It's a distributed marketplace. DNS registration. So DNS, like domain names, who has what, that's all maintained by one central authority called ICANN. And these guys are basically, they kind of control who has what. They sell domain, ultimately kind of control the record of who has what domain names. A great project called Namecoin is working on decentralizing this through the same kind of Bitcoin concept. Some friends of mine in a company called Jim are working on doing this with healthcare. So you look at this picture, like imagine all the paper healthcare records in the world and how many different doctors you've been to, and how many different providers you might be going to right now. How many disparate records there are all over the world. There's not a very good way of actually maintaining consensus across all of those records about what is actually the case with you. It's a very inefficient system. So again, use your imagination. That's what's exciting about this stuff. Let's get a little bit more into some of the implications for society. What does decentralization, and particularly decentralized money, mean for the world? And one of my favorite quotes from F.A. Hayek here, or a quote that I like for the slideshow because I looked it up before the slideshow. Hayek has some good lines. This is one of them I was actually new to. So one of the first implications, which is really important, and which some of you guys may be familiar with, is that it does offer the possibility of a free money for the first time in the history of the world, really. There have been other attempts at this, but Bitcoin is far more resilient because it's on a distributed network and a distributed ledger than any other kind of money to centralized control. It doesn't need centralized control. That's kind of the first thing. And so, you look at the world today, most currencies managed by central banks. These are things which can go by the wayside with Bitcoin. And things that go by the wayside with that, inflation, hyperinflation, which ruins people's resources, destroys capital, destroys societies, leads to starvation, leads to Nazism, leads to fascism, leads to communism. All this bad stuff all the bad stuff funded by inflation, which are basically, again, governments increasing money supplies arbitrarily. These are things which can go by the wayside with Bitcoin. Bitcoin really can't be manipulated in that way. And Nick Rundlet asked a question about how a deflationary money like Bitcoin what its prospects were like in the world. And what's interesting about Bitcoin is that it is what's called deflationary. So rather than being inflationary in the sense of it's basically increasing a money supply. At a certain point, Bitcoin's money supply will be capped at 21 million Bitcoin. No more will be created. At that point, it becomes a deflationary money, which basically means more or less that money is worth more over time. Less money can bid for more goods. This is there were brief periods of this in U.S. history with the gold standard. These were some of the more prosperous periods in American history. This is a somewhat debated topic among economists, but we can definitely get into that among the Q&A. So one of the things it means is free trade. So I mentioned Open Bazaar earlier. This is something that I think someone might be unmuted. Would you guys be able to mute unless there's something wrong? So just give me a shout out if there's something wrong with the slides. But if you can mute, that would be awesome. So one of the things, again, is free trade. With a distributed Bitcoin-based marketplace like Open Bazaar, again, basically you're running a node in a ledger, and that ledger is basically every listing in the store. You're able to sell anything you want to whomever you want using a medium of exchange which no one else controls, like Bitcoin. So they're actually using the Bitcoin concept to develop a way of making trade perfectly free that no one can censor. And this is a very interesting concept and something I'm really excited about. Some of my friends are working on this. And, it's cool to see concepts like this making progress. Now, a lot of the stuff is moving more slowly than many of us would like, but the basic idea here is really powerful. Bitcoin also opens up a lot of opportunities for free speech in the world. So there's a great story back in 2011. This is very early days of Bitcoin. WikiLeaks had just released, I believe, some of the leaks from Chelsea Manning, and American Express, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard shut off donations to their site. They were under a lot of political pressure. It's understandable. But WikiLeaks was, up shit creek without a paddle, as they say. And the Bitcoin community stepped in to actually provide funding in that time. So they were actually one of the first organizations that started accepting Bitcoin. And this allowed WikiLeaks and it has a lot of other free speech organizations to gain support over the years. Because Bitcoin is, again, uncensorable money. No one can stop you, if you want to donate Bitcoin to somebody. I think most importantly, something that makes me really excited about this, and all these implications are kind of what got me excited about Bitcoin in the first place, was the idea of free people. Bitcoin is not just sort of a computer experiment. It's not nerd money. It's not a abstract thing which is happening somewhere in the world, which doesn't really mean anything to people. It does mean things to people in Venezuela right now, and to many other people around the world. But the Venezuela story captured my imagination. There's a great article by a guy named Jim Epstein at Reason.com. He recently wrote about how individuals in Venezuela, which is currently experiencing three-digit inflation, I think around 720% was estimated, 800% was estimated for 2016. We're now in 2017, so inflation rate is just insane. They're experiencing massive shortages because of price controls. And people are starving. Crime has exploded. People are going without basic healthcare and basic medical services. It's really, really awful, and it breaks your heart. It breaks my heart. And a lot of these things have been caused by authoritarian policies. But what's very funny is that one authoritarian policy in Venezuela is the government funding and subsidization of electricity. And what can you use electricity for? Bitcoin mining, of course. And you can get non-state money with Bitcoin mining, which has not been inflated by the Venezuelan thugs, and which you can use, apparently, how these guys are doing it. It's very complicated, but it's fascinating. They're using it to buy large quantities of food on Amazon, which are then smuggled into the country. And they can feed their families, take care of their extended families and friend groups if they want. And this is all being facilitated by Bitcoin. So there's a lot of cool stuff which Bitcoin can do for people under the thumb of oppressive regimes, which I'm excited about and which fascinates me. So let's get into a little bit about what this means for you. Hopefully some of what I've talked about so far has gotten you excited about what Bitcoin is, how it's being used in the world, how you can use it as entrepreneurs, because you're all in Praxis, and that means you all have something which is sort of that innate entrepreneurial drive, which could enable you hopefully to use this technology or to build on it. or even just to have a strategy for it in your own business that will, I think, allow you to discover things which we haven't thought of yet, not even at BitPay. And we've thought about a lot of stuff. So here's how you can get started with the Bitcoin ecosystem. The first step is getting a Bitcoin wallet, which is very easy. It's like downloading an app from the store. So I'm a little biased, but kind of like the BitPay wallet. We also produce the CoPay wallet, which is sort of like the Chromium to our Chrome. It's sort of like the open source bedrock of our wallet system. Both of these are great for security. In the BitPay wallet, we guide you through setup, guide you through backing up your wallet securely, and kind of what Bitcoin is, how it works differently than, say, a Venmo or a PayPal. A couple other popular ones in the space are Bread Wallet and Airbits. They both have pretty good security focus from what I understand. I've heard good things about them. Get some Bitcoin. So you can do this in several different ways. You can go buy it. Great site for this is coinbase.com. You can also earn it. So, at BitPay, if you're working at BitPay, so Charles essentially and me, that's it. You can earn it. There are a few other places now that are doing payouts with Bitcoin or payroll with Bitcoin, and you might be lucky enough to run into them. You can also get Bitcoin from a friend. So I don't know how many people are on the call now. When I joined, there were like 10, but let's just say if all of you guys send me your Bitcoin addresses after you set up your wallets, I'll send you like $1 in Bitcoin. I'm just really crossing my fingers right now that there aren't 200 of you. So this is one case where I'm hoping for a low turnout. And then use Bitcoin to buy something. So if you're into gaming, go to Steam, go buy a PC game with Bitcoin through BitPay. You can go to gift.com, buy yourself a nice gift card. You go buy some takeout food takeaway. You can go book travel to a lot of different places, Expedia, Destidia, a lot of different travel booking sites now accept Bitcoin. And if you have any questions about that, I can definitely answer. That's part of what we do at BitPay is we help these businesses accept Bitcoin and make it happen in the real world. So now it's time for questions, and I'm going to X out of this little slide here, and looking forward to talking to you guys and hear what you have to say. Let me, how do I turn this thing off? Don't want to leave the meeting. Here we go. Stop the share. Cool. It's all you do. Thanks. Did it.
James, I got a question for you, and I missed the first part of the talk, so I don't know if you covered it a bit, but I want to know what governs like the price variation of Bitcoin. It fluctuates every single day, and I kind of watch it on my app, but it doesn't seem like it's like the stock market. I mean, it is in a sense, maybe. You probably know a little more about this.
It is. So the simple answer is supply and demand, right? Just like everything else, it's not exempt to the law of supply and demand. The question which a lot of financial writers spend a lot of their time working on is like, what is the demand and what's affecting the supply? And to be honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. A lot of people I know spend a lot of time watching the Bitcoin price. I admit that I check it often sometimes too. It's kind of cool if you have Bitcoin to see it going up because, as some of you may know, Bitcoin like several years ago was like $1. Now it's $1,300. So, some people have gotten rich off of this, and I do not give financial advice because a lot of people have also lost a lot of money. So, absolute disclaimer: no financial advice in the course of this entire talk. But that's what people spend a lot of time analyzing it. So there are a lot of things which can affect the Bitcoin price. I mean, public perception. So a big thing right now is whether the Winklevoss twins, they're working on an exchange-traded fund linked to Bitcoin, to the Bitcoin price. And if that gets approved, you're going to see a whole lot of outside interest in Bitcoin all of a sudden. And people have been saying the Bitcoin price has been rising in recent weeks because of that perception. And we'll see, if they're right or wrong. And if that ETF gets approved by the SEC, then you may see, even more people coming into Bitcoin and that price rising again. So one thing about Bitcoin to know is that it's a relatively small market right now. So all the volatility which you see, which, $1 to $1,300 in a few years, those prices can shift very quickly because the pool of adopters right now is still relatively small. So if I came in really early, got a ton of Bitcoin, I could move the market potentially. It's increasingly getting more liquid, so more people are getting into Bitcoin. So that volatility problem is actually going away slowly but surely. There have been times in the last year when Bitcoin's been more stable than the stock market, more stable than I think gold. So it's getting there, but there's still a lot of volatility, and some of those factors I mentioned to you explain why the price varies and how it shifts.
So James, Bitcoin, you described how it works, and it seems incredibly stable from a technological standpoint, but all tech can be compromised, and it's kind of concerning that it's kind of concerning to hold all of your wealth in something that has no physical, tangible, like it's not backed up anywhere. You know, is it possible for the system to be compromised? Is that a legitimate concern?
Okay, so first of all, again, no financial advice. I don't give financial advice, so I'm not advising that you put your money all in Bitcoin. I certainly have not. I'll be very upfront. Like, I'm not that confident in Bitcoin yet, and I'm very confident in it. I've like sold my soul for 2.5 years, and I think I have a contract of 10 more years left to go before they let me go. Yes, it's possible. So what can happen is if you gain a majority share of the mining network, of the hashing power for Bitcoin, you can then control, you know, what transactions are included. You can malleate or you know, change that record. So I don't believe you can reverse. You can actually like change what's already been recorded in the blockchain, but you can start to kind of affect and control how it goes. There are some reasons why you should be concerned about this, and some reasons why you shouldn't be terrified or petrified by this. So concerns is that Bitcoin's still very small. So if a government like the US government, like, you know, got on it and we're like, yeah, like we better shut this down. Like hypothetically, they could potentially get enough mining power to do that and have the control. However, the incentives in Bitcoin are genius. The economic incentives, the mind of Satoshi Nakamoto, or else just whatever spontaneous order, what happened with Bitcoin. I think it was mind. He designed this in order that the incentives are aligned very well. So the incentive for processing transactions honestly and fairly in collaboration with the whole network is that you potentially win new Bitcoin that gets created when you mine a block. And when you have people buying up network power, all of a sudden your money, the value of your Bitcoin, the usefulness of it as a technology, the, you know, your livelihood if you're a Bitcoin miner, all of a sudden it gets threatened. And the value of maintaining a certain percentage of your mining power outside of the hands of some central party becomes way more incentivized. It becomes far more valuable to actually do that. So the price system works in Bitcoin really, really well. Prices are there. Sometimes people don't like it how it works, and sometimes it causes difficulties, but the price incentives work to prevent stuff like that from happening. And so far hasn't really been a big issue, but that is one scenario in which Bitcoin could be potentially compromised. This is why, going back to Cassius's question, you know, a lot of people don't trust what are called altcoins, other digital currencies, which are forked from Bitcoin, basically like copies of Bitcoin, but slightly different. Because they either don't use proof of work, which is that hashing math problem solving thing I talked about, which basically means all the coins have been created and they are assigned kind of more or less arbitrarily to the people who created it and who got it in early. So those are, you know, sometimes called pump and dump schemes, in which if you get in early, then you sell out, and, you know, you get rich, but the value plummets. And then the ones that do use proof of work, their mining hashing power behind these networks are so small relative to Bitcoin that it would be very, very easy to take over the network. So right now, the best bet is Bitcoin, if that's what you want. And it's not a panacea. It's not perfect. And it's going to have, you know, somebody can be concerned about. And it's a very good question. But it's a good bet right now, let's say. And again, not a financial advice. It's a good bet from a technological perspective. It depends, you know. I think people would generally consider Ethereum altcoin, but altcoin kind of has a negative connotation, at least in my circles. So it wouldn't be fair necessarily to like immediately say it's bad because it's not Bitcoin. It's bad because I mean, there are other reasons why Ethereum is bad, and I'm not an expert in that. I've heard arguments on both sides. I think you do the research yourself. But the reason I mentioned to you about network hashing power is important for security.
I know this isn't perhaps your favorite topic, but can we talk a little bit about Bitcoin and the government? How will the government potentially try to control Bitcoin? How will they affect Bitcoin? And then how does Bitcoin affect the government? Because this is not in the government's best interests to have this decentralized currency.
Yeah, so as I answer this, and just as a basic disclaimer, whole presentation, I'm speaking as myself and, you know, why I got into Bitcoin, why I'm interested in it, not speaking as a BitPay representative here or as a BitPay, you know, spokesperson at all. So I will say that Bitcoin has been received various kinds of receptions by governments. And if you mean the US government, what's interesting is that like the Fed chairmans have been very positive about it. So Ben Bernanke was very interested in Bitcoin. It was like, yeah, we should totally, you know, let's see how this develops and let's let it be. And the Fed in general has seemed to be pretty positive about it, which is interesting because if Bitcoin does become more widely adopted, it does kind of threaten some of their consolidated power. They probably see Bitcoin as something which they can work with, or that would help them improve. Basically, they see Bitcoin as a really powerful settlement system. As I mentioned earlier, international transfers, wire transfers, all that stuff. It's using an outdated banking network. If they use Bitcoin, it becomes far more efficient. But they don't see it really as a threat to them right now, and I can't see how that will change. But I do think, yes, Bitcoin depends on who you talk to in the government and what governments are looking at it. But fundamentally, I think the important thing is not so much that it threatens governments or anything like that, but it does allow individuals to have far more freedom and control over their money now, whether or not it ever becomes this sort of like thing which changes society or changes how government works or how government looks.
Hey, James, related to Hannah's question about security, I'd like to know, do you know something about quantum computers and how it could affect Bitcoin?
So do I know about that? All I know is that I know quantum computing is coming, and I know people are working on how they can make Bitcoin ready for that. But I don't know anything else.
Well, okay, thank you.
From what I know, it would essentially revolve around the encryption involved. That if a quantum computer can crack the encryption, then you need the updated encryption that can resist quantum computer attempts to crack it. So
I believe you're right, actually. You're right. It's liquid curve cryptography.
So, James, just kind of curious, do you know anything about securing like devices themselves? Because I know that has been brought up as a risk factor. Not that, Bitcoin itself, the protocol is quite secure, but the devices oftentimes are not so secure. And so I know John McAfee, for example, has talked a lot about the need to create separate Bitcoin wallets, actual physical wallets. I'm just curious if you've heard anything about that or any developments.
Yes, this is a concept called cold storage. So basically, it's like for one thing, you never want to use a device connected to the internet. If you really want to be like absolutely super, super, super secure with your Bitcoin, like no chance of it ever being taken by somebody. You actually use something called air gapping of devices. So basically and I can't fully explain this process because it's a little bit beyond I've not done it. You are able to, you remove a lot of the hardware from a computer essentially, and you just do the basic computing power. You store your Bitcoin on that. It never touches the internet, and so no one can get to it except you. And the process of restoring that is another process as well. You can do things like sweeping to a paper wallet, which basically means you're putting your Bitcoin on a piece of paper which has a private key, which you can then later restore to an online wallet. So there's some. If you're into security, Bitcoin's really interesting because there's a lot to explore there, and you have to be secure with Bitcoin because it's not stored on a server somewhere. It's not, in someone else's bank account that they're responsible for and that they'll pay you back for. It's your money, and use it when you need it, but also lose it when you are bad at security. So that's an interesting concept. I think one of the things which I'm fascinated by, a good intermediary step if you're interested in security, is something called multi-signature addresses or multi-signature wallets. Basically, this is a way of kind of having a multi-device authentication for transactions. So you can actually split up private keys, which are used to sign a transaction among multiple different wallets, which can be on multiple different devices. So on a computer, on a phone, you could have like 5 phones, like in your trench coat, walking down the street, like, gotta make a payment. Phone, tap, 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 tap. Very secure. It's kind of like a Horcrux for your money. So you just split your soul into 7 parts, and nobody can take your money or your immortal evil life. So I think I've gone a little too far there, but multi-signature is really cool. Look it up.
That's really great example, though.
Yeah, the Horcrux. It is the perfect analogy. I mean, if we can really just do Harry Potter analogies for all the Bitcoin stuff, we'll totally win the millennial audience. So yeah, check that out, copay.io. We do a pretty good explanation of the concept there. It's also a place where you can get one of our wallets. So.
Can Bitcoins ever be lost? And also, to kind of piggyback on that question then, what happens if somebody who owns Bitcoin dies? Is it inherited?
That's a good question. Damn, on point. So, one, Bitcoin can be lost, and it's not like losing losing a physical thing. It's like losing a private key, the way of access. So you can send money to an address which nobody has control over accidentally, which is called like burning Bitcoin. It's gone forever. And that Bitcoin money supply just shrinks a little bit. You can also die. And if you don't have things set up to make it possible for people to get the money back, and one of those ways is multi-signature, where you're sharing a wallet across multiple people, then it's gone forever. I was actually just at a conference on last Monday where some guys were working on a project to figure out how to do this. Like, how do you actually get Bitcoin from a dead person into the hands of somebody else? I think that's what they're working on. It's an interesting problem right now. And yeah, one of those things you can do is if you're in a shared wallet, but it's very interesting. It's very different, right, from a bank account where you can just go to the bank and be like, hey, use my dad, give me the money. So
right. So if somebody had like multiple Bitcoins, a nice chunk of Bitcoins, and they died and those Bitcoins disappeared, that would heavily affect how much Bitcoin is worth in the whole Bitcoin market, right? Potentially, in theory, or no?
No, I mean, no, a few Bitcoin, and also like the price is going to affect. It's going to be move more slowly when it comes to just pure demand. The things that move the Bitcoin price really fast, I would say, are probably going to be more things like a lot of people selling at once. One person, forgetting about Bitcoin on a hard drive somewhere is not going to affect the price. It's just going to affect their happiness level, because they're going to come back 10 years from now and be like, oh snap, $10,000 is on that machine. There have been so many cases of this, too many to count. It's really sad. A guy spent 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza once back in 2011, and you bet he is regretting that decision. Hope it was a good pizza though. So great questions. Yeah, that's how it works. So yeah, it's very important that you have access to your private key. You store it well, you back it up well. The BitPay wallet, bitpay.com/wallet, I think does a very good job of explaining how to do that securely. And it's different money. It's digital cash, digital gold.
Oh, one quick question about BitPay. Is BitPay an assistance app for running your own Bitcoin wallet, or do you actually transfer your Bitcoins to BitPay?
So with the BitPay wallet, you're holding the funds, you're holding the private keys yourself. We aren't holding them for you. We wouldn't want to. We're not interested in that. And BitPay's not interested in that. And BitPay cares about individuals actually holding their money and being able to make those transactions securely.
Well, that's really cool, because I know I don't know who else has seen the articles, but there were one major company for sure that essentially was like a bank for Bitcoins, meaning they actually held on to their customers' coins, and they got hacked. And Mt. Gox, all the Bitcoins were lost. And so that's a risk. If you entrust the task to somebody else, then you can have an issue. But that's really cool that you guys let everybody have their own control.
Yeah, it's funny with Mt. Gox. It used to be a Magic the Gathering online exchange card trading platform, and this is like early days of Bitcoin. Then it became a Bitcoin exchange, and people decided to give them a bunch of money. I don't know. It's a funny story, because the history of Bitcoin is just full of all this unconventional entrepreneurship. Like, nobody knew where this stuff was coming from. Nobody knew how to work with it. Just play out as you go along. And it's a fascinating history, and it's still a wide open field in many respects. Just don't be Mt. Gox.
Hey James, I have a question for you. So I've been interested in Bitcoin. I know we had a chance to talk, previously, wasn't able to happen. And I've been interested to start Bitcoin myself, and I'm going to download the BitPay wallet myself after this call. But Bitcoin, if you're going to start using it, do you also have to be a Bitcoin miner? And if you get paid in Bitcoin, how is that taxed? How do you file taxes on that if it is taxed?
My favorite time of the night, disclaimer time. I am not a tax advisor, and I cannot give you advice on how to file your taxes. First and foremost, the first question is you don't have to be a Bitcoin miner. So there are different levels of participation in the Bitcoin network. You can download the full blockchain and be a node on the network, which is if you go download the Bitcoin QT client, which is what's called, it's the original software client for Bitcoin, you are downloading the full blockchain. I think you actually have to be transmitting in order to be a node as well. You can be a miner, which you're actually processing transactions, which means you purchase special equipment. or you can just be a Bitcoin user, which is like kind of what I am. Like I'm just downloading the app, which is kind of like it's a lightweight version of the Bitcoin client. That I'm not downloading the whole blockchain. I'm just broadcasting messages to it, more or less. And people better than this can answer this for me, but you don't have to. Essentially, that is the answer. And for taxes, it's funny because the U.S. government at least, is kind of contradictory about this. One agency says it's money, one agency says it's property. So normally that would be taxed differently. The IRS at least says it's property, so it's taxed in terms of capital gains on how much, when you spend, you're making a capital gains taxable sale of goods. So look it up online, IRS, Bitcoin.
James, who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
It's exactly what Satoshi Nakamoto would ask. I feel like that's a really good question to wrap it up on. Does anyone else have any other ones? This is the adventure. It's Bitcoin's an adventure, guys. You got to go find Satoshi, or else just find out how awesome this technology is.
Do you have more you want to say on that topic or no?
Okay, Satoshi Nakamoto. I've heard so many interesting theories. What's cool about it, I'll just say I don't have an opinion about who it is, but I will say I have an opinion about how cool it is that we have anything these days, which was as awesome and big as this, where the inventor decides to keep silent. So if the inventor or the inventors are still around and still alive, they've like kept this secret inside every day. They're going about their work. They're like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's $1,300. Like everybody's talking about it. And to be able to keep that secret is just like really weird, really interesting. And two, possible that the founder is dead, in which case we'll always have the mystery with us. And just being able to enjoy the fact that we have a true mystery in the modern world where everybody's sharing everything about themselves online, Facebook, Twitter. Like there's no secrecy anymore. This guy is ultimate secrecy, or this lady is ultimate secrecy. And it's not even revealing what he's doing or what she's doing. And, they could get so much acclaim from this, and they could get death threats from it too. But it's really cool. I find it really fascinating. It makes me interested in decentralized technologies, especially because it's not so much about this stuff can happen from anyone, anywhere.
I have one more question I want to throw at you before we wrap up. So speculate for a minute. How do you see Bitcoin evolving? Where do we go from here?
Time frame?
That's a good question. I don't know. You pick the time frame. 10 years?
Okay.
Farther than that? Like long-term future?
10 years is a little long, but I'll try 10 years.
Okay.
It's a little long, but because it's so fast. Like it's only been around for 8 years in terms of actual use. And, BitPay has been around since 2011. A lot of the companies that started then are no longer around. It moves really fast. There's a lot of revolution. Bitcoin, where it'll be in 10 years, I think Bitcoin will be mostly invisible in the sense of like, when you're actually using the technology, you're not actually noticing you're using Bitcoin. You have these really slick user interfaces like Venmo or whatever, and Bitcoin's sort of powering the payments behind that. It's part of what helps to secure ledgers all around the world, especially monetary ones, whether it's a Bitcoin network or some other network like it. If Bitcoin doesn't succeed, I think it has a good shot. But that distributed ledger, distributed network concept will be very powerful and will be behind a lot of the things that you do online. Your web interactions are going to be far more secure. Your money is going to be far more secure. You're going to be, in many respects, hopefully freer and being able to do more, more within your sphere of control. And there's going to be a whole lot of new jobs and goods and services which we've never imagined before, either in ways they've worked or just in the fact of them existing at all. Like when you have a new technology come along, it's not just how it affects the current things which exist, because Bitcoin does that, but it also opens up entirely new possibilities. So, whether again, it's like I can pay out, I can do trustless interactions, trustless funding of, I can do payouts to anyone around the globe, like a million developers around the globe, Bitcoin transactions, far cheaper than any other way we could do today. That enables new kinds of business models, right? And so I'm interested in seeing what kind of businesses develop. So the future of Bitcoin is I don't know. That is the answer I'm trying to get to in a long roundabout way, is that the future is one in which there are fewer limitations on what you can actually do with money and what you can do with any kind of record sharing on the internet.
That was a good answer. You got me excited to see what this is going, how this is going to evolve. I'm liking where you're going with this, with your speculation. Thank
Come, join the adventure.
Thank you, James. This was awesome. We appreciate your time immensely.
Thanks to all of you for joining. You really made this fun for me. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your questions because you asked some really darn good questions tonight.
Yeah, thank you.